Namaste Saraswati Devi Gaurapani Sunabadi Paschatya Deshatarine
Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Prachari Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine
Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadha Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda
Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Sivasadi Vrinda.
Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Jaya Prabhupada Jai Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jai Prabhupada
Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Srila Prabhupada.
Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari
Jaya Radha Madhava, Kunja Bihari.
Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari
Jaya Radha Madhava, Kunja Bihari.
Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari
Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha, Girivaradhari.
Nandana Braja Janaranjana
Yashodanandana Prajanarandana.
Yamuna Tira Banachari
Yamuna Tira Vanachari.
Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari
Jaya Radha Madhava Giridhari.
Jaya Radha Gokulananda Radha Gokulananda Radhe.
Jaya
Radha
Radha
Gokulananda Radhe.
Jaya Radha Landaneshwara Radha Landaneshwara Radhe.
Jaya
Radha
Radha
Nandaneshwara
Nandaneshwara
Radhe.
Adibo,
Haribo,
Adibo,
Haribo,
Adibo, Nitai Gora, Adibo.
Nitai Gaura
Haribo,
Haribo,
Haribo, Haribo, Nitai Gaura
Gaura
Haribo.
Haribo,
Nitai Gaur Pemanande.
Hari Haribo,
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
So, we'll continue with our Bhagavad Gita overview. And 6 remaining chapters. I think we should be able to go through them for because these chapters are shorter than the Bhakti Yoga chapters. So, and yeah, hopefully it will still make sense. So we'll move to the final Jnana Yoga part of Bhagavad Gita. Om Agyantimirandasya Gyanandana Shalukaya Chakshuran Militam Yana Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadam Mayam Danati Swaparantikam Vanchakapatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubevacha Patitanam Pavanepyo Vaishnavepyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasati Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Uday Mahaprema Prabhupur Nirmay Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya
Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
So we've decided instead of a slideshow to display the Bhaktivedanta Veda-based text. Everyone can see chapter 13, Nature, Danger, and Consciousness.
Yes.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So, chapter 13, the Sanskrit title is Prakriti Purusha Viveka Yoga. And let me see if you can see both. You don't see the slideshow right now, right? Can you see the slideshow?
No.
Oh, no.
No, okay.
No.
Okay, anyway, someone's
See the Veda-based
asking question from yesterday class. And the question is, can I ask, yeah. Yesterday you talked about Bhagavad Gita chapter 10, where Krishna said that he is Indra among demigods, letter A among letters, etc. Why, if everything came from Krishna, he named these specific things? Well, Vibhuti means powerful manifestations, and so letter the first letter is, I suppose, the widely used letter, and Indra is the king of demigods. So comparing to other demigods, so yeah, the most impressive manifestations are Krishna. Hopefully this answer can help you to understand. Yeah, is it helping?
Yes, we can.
Good. So can you see now the?
Yes, we can see.
Okay, good. All right, and now the problem is that I cannot go to. I cannot go to the text. Funny. Okay. Got stuck in here. Okay. 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 Now, can you see the better text? Yeah. So this chapter is relative for 35 texts, as opposed to like 55 or 48 in chapters 11, 10. So it begins with Arjuna asking about what is Prakriti, who is Purusha, and what is the field and knower of the field knowledge and the object of knowledge, etc. And few other questions he will ask here. And as we know from the introduction, Bhagavad Gita is discussing 5 topics, and these topics are Karma, Kala, Ishvara, Jiva, and Prakriti. So actually, from the title of the chapter, we can really easily see which topics are discussed in here. So it's nature, danger, and consciousness. So we're talking about, this is Prakriti. This is very interesting. Enjoyer can refer to living entity, but the original enjoyer is the Supreme Lord, and consciousness also refers to both. And this title is given in a kind of equivocal way, because this is what the Sanskrit says, Prakriti Purusha Viveka Yoga. So Viveka means capacity to discriminate is clear. But then Purusha can refer to both the Supreme Lord and living entity. The Supreme Lord is real Purusha, but living entities are trying to be Purushas. And this is what the chapter is discussing. So Krishna says that body is a field of action, and one who knows this body is called the knower of the field. And so then Krishna explains how he is different from other living entities because, oops, all these happen. Because he is the controller of the bodies, and we are also kind of controllers of the bodies, but the difference between us and him is that he controls everybody, whereas we can to some extent try to control ourselves. And yes, some people try to control others as well, but normally it's very difficult and doesn't last very long. And so then he explains everything about the field of activity, which basically is body. And Vedanta Sutra gives full understanding. And so these are 5 great elements. Mahabhutanya Hankaro. Mahabhuta means earth, water, fire, ether, and what else am I missing? Air. So these are the 5 great elements, pulsations, the unmanifest, that 10 senses in the mind, the 5 sense objects, desire, hatred, happiness, distress, the aggregate life symptoms and convictions. All these are considered in summary to be the field of activities and its interactions. This is what's happening within the body. And now, next verse, he explains the process of developing knowledge, which is very interesting because he starts with humility and pridelessness. Amanitvam, adambitvam. Amanitvam means no desire to show off, and adambitvam, no pride. And so we can understand that this is real knowledge, according to Krishna's definition, because the rest is not really knowledge. It's all ignorance. And so this is, I think, really important for us to understand. That's why Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu highlighted the importance of humility in terms of spiritual advancement. We cannot even understand anything if we're not humble. And then he explains the position of the super soul in this world, because this is really important to understand in this material world, what's the role of the Supreme Lord, because I mean this is material world and Supreme Lord is purely spiritual, so what is he doing in this material world? And then Krishna explains what's his position, what's the position of material nature, and what's the position of living entity. So these are very important texts. So starting from text 20, 21, 22, and 23. These are very important texts because then later in text 24, Krishna says, one who understands this philosophy concerning material nature, the living entity, and the interaction of the modes of nature is sure to attain liberation. He will not take birth here again, regardless of his present position. So this is the importance for us. If we understand this knowledge, then we can be liberated from the influence of material life. And so text 20 says material nature and the living entity should be understood to be beginningless. Their transformations and the modes of matter are products of material nature. And then what nature is doing and how do we interact. You see, this chapter, Krishna will explain these 3 subjects out of 5. He spoke about karma, he spoke about time, he spoke about himself a lot, but now he will be speaking about Prakriti. And that is extremely interesting because it says nature is the cause of all material causes and effects, whereas the living entity is the cause of various sufferings and enjoyments in this world. And this is really profound statement because nature is neutral by definition. Enjoyment comes from our, as Chaitanya Charitamrita says, anadharma, our mental state. Because you can see the exactly same things make people enjoy or suffer. Some people enjoy, like if we are offered alcohol, for example, that's going to be suffering for us, right? We don't even want to see that thing. We understand it's poison. But other people take it to be nectar and they pay big money for these bottles of poison. So nectar for one, poison for the other. So therefore nothing really causes happiness, enjoyments, and sufferings in this world except our mind. Our mind makes us suffer or enjoy. That's why mantra is the best thing to become free from the duality of the material life. And so then text 22 explains the position of the living entity who is trying to enjoy material nature, but then he meets with good and evil amongst various species. And then text 23 explains the position of the Lord, who is and who exists as the overseer and permitter, and who is known as the super soul. So this is the position of the Supreme Lord. Sanskrit terms are Upadrashta and Anumanta. Because You can see the first line of the Sanskrit. Upadrashtanumanta cha Bhartabhokta Maheshwara Paramatmeti Chapyuto Dehesmin Purusha Para. So Upadrashta means overseer, witness, right? And Anumanta means permitter, one who sanctions. So because whatever is happening in our lives is only happening with the sanction of the Supersoul. So we can understand that this chapter explains the dynamic of relationships between Prakriti, Purusha, and Ishvara. So, and Krishna says you can either attain liberation by understanding this knowledge, but even if you hear from others and have tendency to hear from authorities, you can also transcend the path of birth and death. So you can be either very smart or very simple, and both of these categories of people attain liberation. And so Krishna further explains the position of the Supersoul, and for example, text 29, he says, one who sees the Supersoul equally present everywhere in every living being does not approach the destination. So yeah, if you perceive the Supersoul, you will never be able to unrestrictedly enjoy in this world, because sense gratification is something which is contrary to the desire of the Supersoul. And so in the same way as criminal cannot do criminal acts in the presence of the police, so in the same way, no one can really commit sinful activities if one realizes the presence of the Supreme Lord. The Lord is a witness. And so then another benefit of perceiving the Supersoul is understanding everyone's spiritual nature, different from the bodies. And very interesting, this text. He sees how beings are expanded everywhere. He attends to the Brahman conception that there is one verse in Bhagavatam, can't remember who was that king, that after Narad Muni spoke to him and helped him to understand the reality, he saw that living entities are everywhere. Yeah, and so the most important thing is, despite contact with the material body, Arjuna, the soul neither does anything nor is entangled. So we are spirit souls, and we are having nothing to do with this world. And this is a result of developing spiritual knowledge. This body, we're only wearing different experiences, and then super souls fulfilling our desires. And so, very interesting. As the sun alone illuminates all this universe, so does the living entity, one within the body, illuminates the entire body by consciousness. So even though super soul is 10,000 of a tip of a hair in the heart, but you can feel what's happening anywhere in your body, from top of your head to till the tip of your toes. And the text 35 is the conclusion. Kshetra kshetragir evam antaram gyana chakshusha bhuta prakriti moksham chaya viduryante te param. Those who see with eyes of knowledge the difference between the body and the knower of the body, and can also understand the process of liberation from bondage in material nature, attain to the supreme goal. And so, yeah, Srila Prabhupada explains that this process of liberation is happening due to good association with devotees, and then following the instructions of the spiritual master, and gradually understanding what's happening in this material world. And so with this, we will move to the next chapter 14, which is the three modes of material nature. Gunatraya Vibhaga Yoga. Vibhaga again is discrimination or understanding. And so three modes of nature. So you can see how systematic Krishna's presentation is, that in chapter 13 he explained the dynamics of Prakriti, Purusha, and Prakriti, Jiva, and Ishvara, right? We won't be using the term Purusha because it might be confusing. It might refer to both Lord and living entity. So anyway, chapter 13 explains the relationship between God, soul, and the world. And now in the next three chapters, Krishna is taking each of these topics separately. And so chapter 14 describes the three modes of material nature. And it's pretty straightforward chapter. It basically describes how the modes of nature operating, and a little bit inspiration in the beginning of the chapter. Krishna says, by becoming fixed in this knowledge, one can attain to the transcendental nature like my own. Thus established, one is not born at the time of creation or disturbed at the time of dissolution. So you will realize yourself as spirit soul if you develop this knowledge. And so Krishna then says, I am the father of all living entities in all species of life, and material nature is the mother, and it consists of three modes of nature, and living entity comes in contact with these modes and becomes conditioned. And so he says the best mode is goodness, but very typical mode for human beings is passion, born of unlimited desires and longing, and action, and is ignorance. Then the results of this mode are madness, indolence, and sleep, which bind the conditioned soul. You can see that different times of the day are also influenced by different modes. Like morning time is goodness, day is passion, and you can see night time is mostly influenced by ignorance. Materialistic people go to some pub, and transcendentalists, they prefer to take rest at the time. The effects of modes are also different. Goodness brings passion. Goodness brings happiness. Passion conditions one to fruitive action, and ignorance binds one to madness. And so he says that these three modes are compete for supremacy, and knowledge is the feature of goodness. Attachment to fruitive activity, intense endeavor, uncontrollable desires, hankering, that's qualities of passion. And qualities of goodness are darkness, inertia, madness, and illusion. And so depending on in which modes one dies, one goes to different destinations. Goodness brings one to the higher planets, passion leaves one amongst human beings, and ignorance brings one to animal kingdom, etc. So Krishna discusses the effects of modes, which are very interesting, and you can look more elaborately in this. And then text 26, he gives the most important piece of knowledge, how to transcend the three modes of nature. One which is in full devotional service, unfailing in circumstances at once mode of material nature, and thus comes to the level of Brahman. So, unfailing devotional service, this is what helps us to overcome the three modes of nature. And so with these, we will move to the next chapter, 15, which will describe the principle of God. So chapter 15 is called Purushottama Yoga, the yoga of the Supreme Person. And this is extremely interesting chapter, and so probably it's worth spending a little bit more on it, even though it only has 20 texts. And so basically in the beginning of this, Krishna said, which is a reflection of the original banyan tree from the spiritual world. And so that is our position in this world, very complicated. We are roaming from branch to branch of this tree. And so these are fruitive activities and their results and all the planets, etc., etc. Brahmana, Brahmatikon, Bhagavan Jeev, that we're roaming all over the universe. Some people, they really dream of interspace, interplanetary travels, but we all have this opportunity. I mean, at the moment of death, we may not necessarily stay on this planet. We might be going to some other planet, hopefully a little bit higher than now, not lower planets, hopefully not Plutonic kingdom, abode of Yamaraj. And so it's recommended to cut down this strongly rooted tree, the weapon of detachment. So for attachment, and surrender to the Supreme Lord. And what are the conditions required for this? One has to be free from false prestige, illusion, false association, understand the eternal, finish with material lust, and free from the dualities of happiness and distress. These kind of people can go to the spiritual world. And then Krishna explains that his spiritual world is self-illuminated, and those who reach it never return to this material world. And text 7, he explains that living entities, they really struggle in this world with their enemies, and who are the main enemies of the conditioned soul? 6 senses, including the mind. So this is very interesting. We, as Prabhupada says, we want to consider someone to be our enemy, but actually no one is born as one's enemy or friend. But our actions actually create enmity or friendship, right? That our mind decides, okay, I don't like this guy, and this guy will be my enemy, right? And then we start acting in inimical way, and then that person also picks up the spirit and turns into the enemy. So that's how it happens in the material world. And of course, this is the biggest problem in the material world, because every living entity struggles for control in this world, and yeah, sometimes, and unfortunately more often than not, this struggle, power struggle, it can also be seen in religious circles. Anyway, from text 8, are carrying concepts as the air carries aroma, and therefore they change the bodies one after another. And so first one develops subtle body, certain mentality, and this subtle body creates gross body automatically. And he says that foolish people can't understand this process of transmigration of the soul. Only those whose eyes are trained in knowledge can see all this. And so then from text 12, a lot of interesting information is given, because this is the final chapter wherein Krishna explains about his opulences, that he started that from chapter 7, and he goes all the way to chapter 15. And so chapter 15 really helps us to understand why Krishna was talking so much about his opulences. So first he says, like he already explained that spiritual world means the world of light, the world of light. But material world is opposite to that. So material world is the world of darkness. And therefore, Krishna has to come to this world as the sun, moon, and fire, and lead the path, give light and heat to everyone. And then text 13, he says he is holding every planet on the orbit, and also he says through the moon he gives the juice of life to all vegetables, which is practically speaking the food, the base food for all living entities, because if someone is a carnivorous animal, they eat herbivorous animals, right? And so, yeah, without food, without vegetation, no one can survive in this world. And then next text, Krishna says, I'm the fire of digestion. And in the last text, he says, I'm the super soul, from me comes remembrance, knowledge, and forgetfulness. So this is really interesting to see the logic of Krishna's explanation, because basically we understand that we leave Krishna and the spiritual world because we are trying to be gods in here, in this material world. And then we might, yeah, actually Prabhupada describes very interestingly that when living entity decides to leave spiritual world, Krishna is following the living entity and literally pleading that please stay back. But living entity kind of ignores Krishna's appeal and goes straight to this material world. And Krishna, if he would want us to fail very miserably in this world from the beginning, he wouldn't even have to do anything. He would just have to kind of ignore material world altogether. But he doesn't do that. He goes to the material world and he becomes the sun and the moon and the fire. So he leads the light and fire for us in this world, welcoming us here. And we really become excited, and then we choose the planet, and Krishna is holding that planet for us to enjoy. And then we run around and try to enjoy, but the basic need is food. And while we're enjoying, Krishna is preparing our food. And then we stick this food in our mouth and we don't even think where it came from. But Krishna becomes the fire of digestion and helps us to digest this food and even push out the. And so we can understand that Krishna is, like, just imagine someone told you, for me, you don't exist. I don't want to know you, right? So you might not like retaliate against this person, but you might just, okay, they want to ignore me, so I'll ignore them, right? That's common logic. So Krishna could just ignore us, okay, we want to ignore him and he will ignore us, but he doesn't do that. Rather, he engages himself in, pretty much we can understand, eternal and completely selfless service. And then at some point and he's just doing that until we realize, okay, someone is really looking after me. And even then, Krishna says, okay, if you want to understand me, then you can study Vedas, because everything about me is explained in the Vedas. So that's called real love. Only Krishna has this kind of love, completely selfless. And really, our love towards Krishna develops as a response to his love towards us. And so text 16, Krishna says, two kinds of living beings live in the spiritual and material world. In the spiritual world, everyone is infallible, and in the material world, everyone is fallible. And besides these two, there is a Supreme Lord. and he entered into the three worlds to maintain them. And he says, because I'm transcendental beyond both the fallible and the infallible, and because I'm the greatest, I'm celebrated both in the world and in the Vedas as that supreme person. Yeah, no one can really not even not only in his powers but in his compassion towards us. And that's why we're not glorifying Krishna because he belongs to our tradition, but because there is no one else greater than him. Verse 19 says, whoever knows me as the Supreme Personality of Godhead without doubting is the knower of everything. He therefore engages himself in full devotional service to me, O son of Bharata. And so that's Guhyatama chapter, the most confidential part of Vedic scriptures. And whoever understands it can become wise. And unfortunately, very few wise people in this world. Mostly people are otherwise. And so the last topic out of the three we've discussed in relation to chapter 13 is Jiva. And it's very interesting how Krishna is approaching the subject of Jiva. He speaks about divine and demonic natures. And it's very interesting that first three texts are listing more than 20, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 25 qualities, 25 divine qualities, just for showing us the contrast. And then he explains 6 demoniac qualities, and it's very amazing how 6 demoniac qualities can completely wipe out all 25 divine qualities. And these qualities are very similar: pride, arrogance, conceit, anger, harshness, and ignorance. And so, because we are living in this world, material world, demoniac world, basically speaking, that this chapter is mostly on the behavior of demons. Is that they're not clean, they don't behave properly, and they say that this world is unreal, with no foundation, no God in control, produced of sex desire, has no cause other than lust, etc., etc. We can see, for example, communists are very typical demons, which describe in this chapter. They reject God's concept, and think that the world belongs to humans. And so Krishna is very how demonic people think. So much wealth do I have today, and I will gain more according to my schemes. So much is mine now, and it will increase in the future more and more. He's my enemy, and I've killed him. And my other enemies will also be killed. I'm the Lord of everything. I'm the enjoyer. I'm perfect, powerful, and happy. I'm the richest man surrounded by aristocratic relatives. There is none so powerful and happy as I am. I shall perform sacrifices, shall give charity, and rejoice. In this way, such persons are deluded by ignorance. And so ultimately they go to hell. Sometimes they perform sacrifices also, but in name only, without following any rules and regulations. Prabhupada says the example of demoniac sacrifice is like Vedic system is to burn ghee and in the yagya and offer some fruits and grains and chant some mantras. And the result will be promotion to the higher planets. But demons, they don't want to follow the proper system. Rather than that, they invent spaceships, and instead of burning ghee, they burn a lot of kerosene for the station, trying to reach high planets, and of course destroying a lot of taxpayers' money in the process. So it's really demoniac demoniac tendencies. Why people, I mean, you already been to the moon, as you claim, and you brought just a couple of stones from there, so why do you want to go there again? It's like crazy. And so yeah, it's basically they're hoping, okay, by the time I destroy this planet, we'll manage to get to outer space and colonize other planets. I mean, if you mess up this planet, which basically provides everything for your lives, how can you hope that the other planets, which are much less suitable for human beings, how one can sustain? But like demonic people, they don't have any common sense. And so basically Krishna explains that there are 3 gates leading to hell: lust, anger, and greed. And so demons, they are influenced by lust, anger, and greed. And he says how one can become influenced by lust, anger, and greed: discarding spiritual injunctions and acting according to our own whims. Such person attains neither perfection nor happiness nor the supreme destination. And again, the last text is the conclusion. One should therefore understand what is duty and what is not duty by the regulations of the scriptures. Knowing such rules and regulations, one should act so that he may gradually be elevated. So, the 3 topics which were presented in chapter 13, right, at length. Each chapter is dedicated to one separate topic. And now in chapter 17, Krishna is explaining the process, which is called faith, which can help one to advance, or can help Jiva, being conditioned by Prakriti, still advance towards developing relationships with the Supreme Lord through the process of faith. And so, because Krishna kind of told that one has to have faith in scriptures. But then Arjuna says, what about those people who don't have Shastriya, Shraddha? What's their position? Can they advance at all? And then Krishna explains, yes, are they in goodness, passion, or ignorance? And Krishna says, yeah, that they can belong to all 3 modes. And he says what's happening in the mode of goodness: people worship demigods; in passion, demons; and in ignorance, ghosts and spirits. And so pride, egotism, lust, attachment, foolishness, self-torture is demoniac. If someone does austerities and penances not recommended in the scriptures. And therefore, it's really important for us to understand that these consciousness as not like austerities Hiranyakashipu performed. You know, we can't imagine how Hiranyakashipu could do what he did, but in reality, he was impelled by his false ego. And we can see false ego can make people do amazing things. And yeah, torturing the elements of the material body is not recommended austerity for us, but being steadily engaged in devotional service is the best austerity. It's like Bhakti Swami mentions that if someone attends daily Bhagavatam, that is much greater austerity than Hiranyakashipu performed for so many thousands of years, standing on the tip of his toes and allowing ants to leave his body, to eat his body alive. So we can say how this, attending Bhagavatam is not such a terrible austerity as Hiranyakashipu's austerity, but the matter of fact is that he was doing that terrible austerity for his sense gratification, whereas attending Bhagavatam class is just meant for Krishna's pleasure. That's why it's considered to be greater austerity. And then Krishna speaks about food in different modes of nature. And of course, the recommended foods for us are in the mode of goodness, which increase the duration of life, purify one's existence, give strength, health, happiness, and satisfaction. Such foods are juicy, fatty, wholesome, and pleasing to the heart. And then he says about food in modes of passion: bitter, sour, salty, hot, pungent, dry, burning, dear to those who are in mode of passion. Such food causes distress, misery, and disease. We can see that so many people in India are attached to this kind of food, and then they get sick and they don't live very long. And so then food is, of course, decomposed in putrid, like meat, fish, and eggs, for example. That's food in ignorance. Different types of sacrifices and motivation is distinguishing different modes, sacrifices in different modes. And then Krishna speaks about austerity. And it's very interesting that he focuses on austerity in goodness, because that's what Krishna recommends. He gives in 3 texts explanations of what austerity in goodness is for the body, for the speech, and for the mind, because this is what he wants us to do. So if you want to be austere in Krishna consciousness, and I think everyone heard that Krishna consciousness means transcendental austerity, apodivyam putrakayena sattvam. So these are the austerities recommended for spiritual advancement. And then he speaks about austerities or penances in passion and ignorance, which do not really help one to advance, and in ignorance one degrades very quickly. And then he speaks about charity in different modes, in goodness, passion, and ignorance. Of course, in goodness, that is giving to someone who is knowledgeable and advanced spiritually. Passion is just give to someone who can help us to enjoy our senses, like relatives, for example. And giving to unworthy people, that's mode of ignorance. And so then he describes the three transcendental words, Om Tat Sat, which are indicating the supreme absolute truth. And he says, transcendentalists, they perform sacrifice, and they start with Om to attain supreme. And in order to indicate that this is not for me, they say the word Tat. Tat means Supreme Lord, so it's meant for the Supreme Lord's pleasure. It's like during Yagya, priests are chanting Idam Krishnaya, Idam Namama, Idam Narsingaya, Idam Namama, Idam Narayana, Idam Namama. So this is all meant for the pleasure of the Supreme Lord and not for me. So that's what the word indicates. And Sat, that is indicating the objective of devotional service, right? The Supreme Lord for his pleasure. So it's like Om means Oh my Lord, Tat means that, and Sat means eternal. And so he highlights at the end importance of charity, sacrifice, charity, or penance. He says, without faith in the Supreme, it's all impermanent, it's called asat, and useless both in this life and next. So basically speaking, the idea behind is that chapter 16, if you remember, have described the three gateways to hell: lust, anger, and greed. And so how do we neutralize lust, anger, and greed? And I hope you're all very interested, because unless we become free from lust, anger, and greed, it's really hard for us to advance spiritually. And you can see the solutions are given in this chapter, that by performing yagya for the pleasure of the Supreme Lord, we become free from lust, and by self-control, tapasya, in mode of goodness, we can become free from anger, and by charity, we can become free from greed. So, yeah, these things are important. And the final chapter 18, which is the conclusion, the perfection of renunciation. And so it's a long chapter in Bhagavad Gita, but it kind of highlights the most important points from Bhagavad Gita. And for example, that's the importance of sacrifice, charity, and penance in text 5, that they should never be given up, that they purify even great souls. So as long as we are in the material world, we always get contaminated, and so we need purification. And then Krishna is prescribed duties in different modes of nature. If someone gives up prescribed duties because of inconvenience, then that's tamas, mode of ignorance. If someone gives up prescribed duties out of fear, that's passion. And following prescribed duties because it is duty with renunciation, that's mode of goodness. And so in this way, Krishna explains to us again how different modes of nature influencing everything we're doing in this world. Text 14 is very interesting. The place of action, body, the performer, the various senses, the many different kinds of endeavor, and ultimately the super soul. These are the 5 factors of action. Whatever right or wrong action a man performs by body, mind, and speech is caused by these 5 factors. And one who thinks himself the only doer, not considering the 5 factors, is certainly not very intelligent and cannot see things as they are. And then, of course, he's encouraging Arjuna to fight. He says, if you're not motivated by false ego, even if you kill, you will not kill and will not be bound by your action. Then he explains action or action in different modes of nature and understanding and determination in different modes of nature, and then happiness in different modes of nature, which is very important for us because we want happiness. It's almost happiness in the mode of goodness feels like poison in the beginning, but at the end it becomes like nectar. And passion is the other way around. But ignorance is poison at the beginning and in the end. And then he explains different qualities of different varnas in this world. And he says perfection can be attained if one performs his own work according to one's nature and worship the Supreme Lord at the same time. And he repeats the same statement he already made in chapter 3. Here in text 47, he says, it is better to engage in one's own occupation and perform perfectly than to accept another's occupation and perform it perfectly. Duties prescribed according to one's nature are never affected by sinful reactions. And he says the faults are not to be considered. In this material world, there are always faults, whatever we do. So that should not make us concerned. And then he focuses on the importance of devotional service. He says, only in this way one can understand me and enter into the kingdom of God. And devotees are always protected by the Lord, and therefore they only depend on the Lord in their activities. And so he says, if you become conscious of me, you will pass over all the obstacles of conditioned life by my grace. If, however, you do not work in such consciousness, but act through false ego, not hearing me, you will be lost. So, contrast to what is happening if someone is conscious of Krishna or not. Then if one is not acting according to Krishna's direction, then one will be misdirected by Maya. And he said, your nature is to fight, so you either fight for myself or you fight for yourself. And don't want to fight for myself, it doesn't mean you will not fight anymore. And he says the Supreme Lord in everyone's heart. And so he is directing the wanderings of all living entities. And so basically, Krishna says one should surrender to the Supreme Lord. And so Krishna says, this knowledge should elaborate on this fully and decide what you do. So this is the top knowledge. Krishna says again, this verse, if you remember, appeared almost in the same form in the end of chapter 9. So it is repeated again. Always think of me, become my devotee, worship me and offer your homage unto me. Thus, you will come to me without fail. I promise you this because you are my very dear friend. And of course, text 66, Prabhupada speaks about surrendering without fear. And Prabhupada says that this knowledge should not be explained to everyone, only to those who are austere, devoted, engaged in devotional service, and those who are not envious of Krishna. But then if someone explains this supreme secret to the devotees, he can gain pure devotional service as guarantee from Krishna and come back to him at the end. That's why it's really important that we take seriously in Krishna consciousness, because that gives us guarantee from Krishna that we will advance in our spiritual life. And so he says, even listening with faith, this conversation, if we don't have any envy, we become free from sinful reactions and attain to the auspicious planets where the pious dwell. And then Krishna is asking Arjuna, so are you ready to act? Arjuna says, yes, my illusion is gone. I have regained my memory, and now I'm prepared to act according to your instructions. And then in the last 5 verses, Sanjaya concludes the conversation. He says, thus I heard the conversation of 2 great souls, Krishna and Arjuna, and so wonderful is that message that my hair is standing on end. So he could hear this conversation just by the mercy of his guru, Vyasadeva. And he's really enjoying reflecting on that. And this wonderful form of Krishna makes him wonder and rejoice again and again and again. And then, of course, the last text, which we've mentioned, Yatra Yogeshwara Krishna, Yatra Parthadan Uttara, Tatra Shri Vijayavutir, Dhruvanitir Matir Mama. Wherever there is Krishna, the master of all mystics, and wherever there is Arjuna, the supreme archer, there will also certainly be opulence, victory, extraordinary power, and morality. That is my opinion. So that's it for the whole of Bhagavad Gita in a nutshell. So hopefully it makes some sense. And so let's see if you have any questions today. You can type them in the chat box.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, very, very good class. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I had one question on one of the verses. I forgot the verse. Where you said that people in the mode of goodness, they worship the demigods. The people in the mode of passion, they worship demons. But in this world, everyone is in the mode of passion, mostly, many people. But they don't worship. Which demon do they worship? Most of them are atheists, right? So, which is the demon here?
Well, Prabhupada gives example of some man who was worshipping Adolf Hitler during the Second World War because he made good business selling weapons, I think. So, and it's a classical example of worshipping demon. Of course, we can see that demons are also worshipping demigods sometimes. So it's not like black and white, but this is the tendency, at least, that pious people worshipping demigods and passionate people worshipping demons and ignorant people worshipping ghosts and spirits. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. It makes sense. Yeah, and
Yeah.
many people again are quite proud. They might not worship anyone, but do you just be worshipping your own false ego? People who are so full of themselves. I don't know.
Well, I think everyone has some heroes in life. So it's, yeah, one has to be like mega powerful in order not to worship anyone and not to have any heroes.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. So another question, Max. If night is predominantly ignorance, why so many artists find inspiration during the night? Well, because they are in ignorance, and so that's their natural mode which they find inspiration. But you can see, for example, those people who make great discoveries, etc. Oftentimes it's happening early in the morning during Brahma Muhurta time.
Mharaj,
So, and yeah, it depends which time of the night it is, because if it is towards the end of the night, it can be close to Brahma Muhurta, so that could be even goodness. But if it is like at the early part of the night, then it's ignorance. Yeah.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, this last verse where I think Vasudev is saying, who's saying this? Wherever there is Krishna.
Yeah.
So who's actually saying this?
Sanjay.
Sanjay is saying.
Yeah.
And wherever
Yes.
Krishna and wherever is Arjuna.
Yeah.
In the current
Means
in the current world, how would we we cannot interpret this in the current world, because wherever there is Arjuna, how would that interpret in the current?
There is no Arjuna.
well, Krishna means Supreme Lord, and Arjuna means
Yes.
devotional service.
Okay.
So whenever someone's engaged in devotional service, then all these things follow.
Okay.
May not come immediately, because it didn't come immediately to Pandavas, didn't come immediately to God. It had to see the result that everything, opulence, victory, extraordinary power, and morality, all became available to them. So that's like results they are material results, they are very quickly coming, but then one is losing them also pretty quickly. That's the difference. Yeah. All right. So if someone has an answer, otherwise, so finish here, because it's also good to take a little bit rest, and if you do take early rest, you regulate your sadhana, while I think some of you are, like most of you are at home, right?
Yes.
Yes, Maharaj, we are home, but we are working from home, many of us. But
Yeah.
our jobs allow it, but many of Yeah, there are many who can't work, and it's quite.
Yeah. So hopefully that will help you to regulate your sadhana. And most important thing in sadhana is take early rest, because you cannot rise early unless you take early rest. So please try to change your habits and get into the habit of early rest.
Yes.
What time is that?
And I think when is our next class?
On Monday, Maharaj.
Monday, okay. So you'll have a few days break from Sagar Swami. And we'll have class Bhagavatam over you, Mahaprabhu. Prabhu.
Yes, Maharaj, if that's okay. Yeah, as in, I think I was thinking we've got Ram Navami next week as well.
Mm-hmm.
So as in, we could speak a little bit on Lord Ram as well, depending on what you think's fine, Maharaj.
Yeah. I mean, we could potentially just focus on those chapters, say, of the 9th canto, or texts which glorify Lord Ramachandra.
Yeah. Okay, Maharaj. That sounds very nice.
Yeah, because how many days we have? How many nights we have for this?
So next week we have four classes booked on Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday.
Mm-hmm. 30th, 1st, and 2nd. And they're all meant to be based on Bhagavatam, right?
Yes, Maharaj.
Okay, all right. So thank you very much, and have a good rest, and have sweet dreams of Krishna. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna.
All right. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Jai.
Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki jai.
Jai.
Nitai Gaur Premanande.
Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna.
Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
And